Once upon a time, there lived a poor widow, and she had a son, Jack, and a cow, Belyanka. The cow gave milk every morning, and the mother and son sold it in the bazaar, and that was how they lived. But once Belyanka did not give milk, and they did not have food. Mom decided to sell the cow and open a shop with the proceeds. Jack took the rein in his hands and led the cow to the market. No sooner had he arrived than he met some wonderful old man. He said he would like to trade Jack's cow for beans. And with these words, he took out a handful of some strange beans from his pocket. The old man said these beans are magical. They need to be planted in the evening, and by morning they will grow to the very sky. Jack became very interested and agreed. The boy came home early. Mother was very angry that he gave the dairy cow in the whole neighborhood for a handful of some nasty beans. But Jack remembered the old man's words and decided that there was nothing to do, and planted beans in the yard. He went up to his attic sad, and fell asleep. In the morning, Jack woke up and saw something like a large tree in the yard. And this, it turns out, his beans sprouted, and the huge stem continued to grow upward until it grew to the sky. Jack jumped onto the stem and climbed up like a ladder. He climbed and climbed and climbed and climbed until, at last, he reached the sky. There he saw a long and wide road that led him to a huge castle. Jack went to his gate and knocked. The gate opened, and a tall woman stood on the threshold. Stuttering with fear, the boy asked for something for breakfast. The giantess let him in, but warned him not to catch the eye of her husband, because he is a cannibal. She took Jack to the kitchen. But before he had time to eat even half of his breakfast, suddenly the whole house shook from someone's steps. The boy was not taken aback and instantly jumped into the furnace. And at that very moment, the cannibal entered the room. Well, he was as big as a mountain. The cannibal took out 2 bags of gold from a huge chest and sat down to count the coins. He counted and counted, finally began to nod off, and began to snore. Then Jack quietly climbed out of the oven, crept past the cannibal, grabbed 1 bag of gold, and rushed to the beanstalk. He threw the bag down, and he began to go down the stem lower and lower, until, finally, he found himself at his house. Jack told his mother everything that had happened to him, and handed her a bag of gold. They began to live on the money that was in the bag. But eventually the sack was empty and Jack decided to try his luck one more time at the top of the beanstalk. One fine morning, he got up early and climbed a beanstalk. The man-eater's wife stood at the threshold of the huge castle. She said that she would not let him in, because the last time her husband had lost a bag of gold. But all the same, she took pity on the poor boy, and let him into the castle. Suddenly the footsteps of a giant were heard, and Jack again hid in the furnace. The cannibal entered and told his wife to bring the hen that lays the golden eggs. The giantess brought it, and the ogre ordered the chicken to lay, and she laid the golden egg. The pleased giant began nodding and snoring. Then Jack climbed out of the oven, grabbed the golden chicken, and rushed to the beanstalk. The boy returned home. He showed his mother a wonderful chicken, and they began to live selling golden eggs. But soon it seemed to Jack that this was not enough. And he again decided to try his luck at the top of the beanstalk. This time the boy climbed into the castle through the window. He jumped into a copper cauldron and hid. The cannibal and his wife entered the room. The giant smelled the boy, and they rushed to look for him in the oven. But he was not there. They searched every nook and cranny, but they didn't think to look into the copper cauldron. Desperate to search, the ogre ordered his wife to bring a golden harp and put it on the table. Under her beautiful sounds, the cannibal snored. Then Jack quietly climbed out of the cauldron, grabbed the golden harp and rushed to the door. But the harp played loudly and woke the cannibal. Jack ran at breakneck speed, leaping onto a beanstalk, and the giant in pursuit. Jack went down to his house and yelled at his mother to carry the axe. The mother ran out with an axe in her hands. The boy grabbed the axe and began to chop the beanstalk. The ogre felt the stem swing violently and stopped. Then Jack struck again with an axe and cut the beanstalk. It swayed and collapsed, and the ogre fell to the ground and crashed. From that day on, Jack and his mother never knew poverty again. But the boy was very sorry that, because of their greed, they almost paid with their lives. He promised that he would never steal again, and would work hard for the good of the family. My grandfather planted a turnip, and it grew big, very big. Never seen such a turnip in the villages. And so my grandfather went to pick a turnip. Pulls, but cannot pull. The grandfather did not know what to do. And that way, but it will not pull out in any way. Then the grandfather called the grandmother to pull the turnip. An old woman came, grabbed her grandfather by the back, and they began to pull the turnip together. The grandmother is for the grandfather, and the grandfather for the turnip. They pull, but they just can't pull it. It's just some kind of trouble. The grandfather pondered and realized that it was time to call the granddaughter for help. And they began to call the little girl at the top of their voices, so much so that the whole village trembled. The granddaughter came running, took hold of the grandmother's skirt, and again they began to pull the turnip. The granddaughter for the grandmother for the grandfather, and the grandfather for the turnip. They pull, but they cannot pull. The old people were upset, because such a turnip disappears. Then the granddaughter decided to call her dog, Bug, so that at least she could help pull the turnip. Bug came running, grabbed her granddaughter by the handkerchief, and they began to pull the turnip together. A bug for a granddaughter for a grandmother for a grandfather, and a grandfather for a turnip. They pull, but they cannot pull again. The grandfather and grandmother were even more upset, because the uneaten turnip will disappear. Suddenly the bug barked and ran away. The dog returned not alone, but with a cat. She grabbed the beetle by the tail, and began to pull the turnip all together. A cat for a bug for a granddaughter for a grandmother for a grandfather, and a grandfather for a turnip. Pull, but not stretch. The old people were upset with their granddaughter. They will not see a turnip. Suddenly the cat ran into the barn. She was gone for a long time, and she returned not alone, but with a mouse. The grandfather and the woman, and the granddaughter and the beetle, began to ask the mouse for help. She wagged her tail, squeaked twice, and then grabbed the cat's fur with her little paws. And again they pulled the turnip together. A mouse for a cat for a bug for a granddaughter for a grandmother for a grandfather, and a grandfather for a turnip. Pull, and pulled the turnip. And so the grandfather decided to share the turnip. He took half for himself, gave a third to his grandmother, a little less to his granddaughter, a piece of the beetle, a half of a piece for a cat, and a very small crumb for a mouse. The animals were offended by their grandfather because they helped in the same way, and he divided the turnip dishonestly. A year has passed. Grandfather planted the turnip again, and it grew larger than before. For a long time such a turnip has not been seen in the villages.
Cool.
And so my grandfather went to pick a turnip. Pulls and this and that, but will not pull. The grandfather did not know what to do. And I decided to call my grandmother for help again. They began to pull the turnip together. The grandmother is for the grandfather, and the grandfather for the turnip. They pull, but they just can't pull it. Then the grandmother called her granddaughter. The granddaughter came running, and they pulled the turnip together. The granddaughter for the grandmother for the grandfather, and the grandfather for the turnip. Pull, but not stretch. The grandfather was upset and went to ask the animals for help. He called Bug, but she only turned her face away, wagged her tail and ran away. Grandfather found a cat, and she climbed onto the roof of the barn. Then the old man went to the mouse. But she did not listen to him either. Then the grandfather realized that the animals were offended by him for not honestly sharing the turnip. After all, without a mouse, a cat or a bug, grandfather cannot see a turnip. The old man thought, collected his thoughts, and went to the animals again. He apologized to the bug, asked the cat for forgiveness and promised the best piece of turnip for the mouse. Then the animals agreed to help their grandfather.
Okay.
And they began to pull the turnip together. A mouse for a cat for a bug for a granddaughter for a grandmother for a grandfather, and a grandfather for a turnip. Pull, and pulled the turnip. Baba baked turnips. For a long time such delicious turnip has not been seen in the villages. And the grandfather divided the turnip equally, a piece for himself, grandmother and granddaughter. A bug with a cat and even a mouse were received each piece. Everyone was happy. So, they lived in peace and harmony happily ever after.